I think the last thing we're going to end up hitting on is just talking a little bit about functions and some things you may or may not know about how functions operate. One thing that I think is pretty interesting about functions in JavaScript, which is wildly different than PL SQL, is that they're a value that can be reassigned. Now, in PL SQL land, you can create or replace a procedure or create or replace a function. And if you run that several times, then you can override an existing function. But you can't really do that at runtime or dynamically change how something's going to operate. But you can do that in JavaScript. The other thing that you can do with a function, because it is a value, is you can pass it around as a parameter. And the last thing we're going to talk about is what's referred to as an IFI, which is an immediately invoked function expression and its place in JavaScript development. So without further ado, let's check it out. And how did I lose my, there it is. Bring this back. So we're going to go ahead and comment that out and open this up. I'm going to take a look at functions. So some things to know about functions in JavaScript. There are JavaScript functions that are provided to us by our environment. We have done no work, but we're able to leverage them. And the simplest one that we typically introduce developers to is the alert. And so when I save and run, my page runs and it just says, hello. I didn't write that function. It was just defined for me. But what's really bizarre and something that you got to watch out for, because it will cause you some grief eventually sometime, I guarantee it, is that I'm actually going to refer to that name. I'm not going to invoke it by providing parentheses. So I'm going to refer to the alert function, and I'm actually going to assign it the console.log function. And so this is the exact same alert as above. So your code is the same, yet it's going to do two wildly different things. Save and run. I get hello here, but then later I get hello down here in the console. Why is that? Well, because I assigned a value to that alert function. I overrode it to do something else. So that is something that you could use effectively. Strategically, that makes sense, but recklessly, that's a huge problem. So be careful with that. I don't want to get spammed with these alerts anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and comment those out. Oh, this is a function declaration. So in this case, I'm making my own function, and then I'm going to go invoke it. If you do not invoke a function, it will not run. So if I comment this out and run this, notice we'll see absolutely nothing in our console. Nothing happened. Uncommented out, you should see that we actually get our function down here, or our output here. Now, in this case, my function's pretty static in that it always says hello, and I might want it to say something else. So if you want to add a parameter, we'll just put greeting here, and then I'll reference greeting in my log. So I can add greeting here, and but that means that I need to provide a value. Now, if I don't want to provide a value, if I want to default something, I should be able to I should be able to say equals hello. And my default greeting should be hello. So if I choose not to provide a value, then the default is going to be hello. And that's something that's very similar to PL SQL. Let's go ahead and save and run. There's our hello. But I could change this to say howdy, save and run. And then we see that because I provided howdy, I kind of overwrote what's going on there. There's a couple things about this that I think are interesting, and that is, check this out. So remember that hoisting idea that I talked about a second ago? If I scroll this up to the top and I run this, notice that I called greet before it was even defined, and it worked. That exact same function hoisting concept applies because I used a function declaration. So it's kind of like this function exists all the way at the top of my page. Now, what doesn't work is you can assign a function to a value, and I can invoke it just like it's a function. So it looks almost the same. It's very similar, but not exactly the same. And this is what's called a function assignment. I'm assigning this variable, this function, as a value. Let's go ahead and run this. Oops, save. You can see that it ran just fine. I had my rude grr greeting. However, if I try to slide this line up and save it, what should happen is I get an error that says, what are you talking about? You can't do that. It's not defined. You might be thinking, well, Tyson, you're using this let declaration, and let doesn't automatically hoist things to the top. So I need to change that from let to var, and that should fix my issue. And I'll say save. But no, actually, it doesn't matter if you're using var, let, const, or whatever. If you try to use function assignment, you cannot reference that function before that assignment has happened. I think the last thing we're going to have time for today is exploring immediately invoked function expressions, or an IFI. Why is that helpful, and why should we care about it? It's helpful, and we should care about it because Apex or JavaScript is functionally scoped. The values that we use and build and reference are kind of scoped to the function that we're currently in. Well, remember that if we define a function, say rude greeting, we have a scope here inside of rude greeting that isn't shared anywhere else. But the problem is that we have to then invoke that function so it actually starts executing and running. An immediately invoked function expression is basically just a construct that gives us a function that also is immediately invoked, so we don't have to just give it some sort of name and then call it at the bottom of our document. Oops. So here is our immediately invoked function expression, and this is the telltale sign here. We have a function that's wrapped in some parentheses, and then we have some parentheses at the end here that invoke that function. There's more details and nuance to it than what I'm sharing today, but I just kind of want to show you what that looks like. I'm also using some best practices here where I'm saying for this block, we want to go ahead and use strict. We want our extra rules that we talked about earlier. And what's interesting here is I'm going to make an employee name, Smith. I'm going to log it. And then I'm going to try to reference that exact same employee name outside the scope of my code. And what should happen, I have let me comment these out. I think I needed a semicolon right there, but oh well, let me save and run that. But now we can see that employee name is not defined. It happily logged out Smith, but it happily logged out Smith when it was inside the scope of this IFI, but outside the scope of this, this value is not available. And the reason why we do this, again, is to protect or encapsulate our custom logic. So it's all self-contained, and nothing from the outside world can mutate or change what's going on in our custom code. And it's kind of like our little safe place to write our application logic without really polluting the rest of the application.